Hello friends, myself Dr. Sandeep Pakhle, Professor and Head Department of Anatomy, Rural Medical College, Loni. Today we are going to study cerebellum second part. This lecture is prepared from standard textbooks and reference books of anatomy. Text and diagrams used in this presentation are from Neuroanatomy by Vishram Singh, Gray's Anatomy by Elsewhere publication. Some of the pictures are used which are freely available on internet. Credit is given separately on the respective slides. It is only for the purpose of teaching students and not for the commercial. Last time when we studied cerebellum, we have defined the cerebellum as the largest part of hindbrain, which is situated in the posterior cranial fossa behind the pons and medulla oblongata. We have seen its features, different lobes, fissures, morphological and functional subdivisions, and the histology, or we can say the structure of the cerebellum. Today we are going to study the deep nuclei, function, connections, and applied anatomy of the cerebellum. Now first of all, intracerebellar nuclei. They are also called as central nuclei. These are masses of grey matter embedded in the white matter of the cerebellum. We can say these are clusters of grey matter embedded in the deep part of the white matter. They are grouped into 4. On each side, they are 4 in number. Lateral to medial, these are dentate nucleus. So this is dentate nucleus. Then emboliformis, this is emboliformis nucleus. Then globose nucleus, this is globose nucleus. And the last one, medial most, is fastigial nucleus. So dentate nucleus, emboliformis, globose nucleus, fastigious nucleus. These are the 4 group of intracerebellar nuclei. In a larger view, we can make out this one is the dentate nucleus. Then this is called as emboliformis. These two are globosus and this one is fastigi. The globosus and emboliformis together it is called as nucleus interpositus. The nucleus fastigi, which is the medial most, is nucleus of archicerebellum. Nucleus globosus and emboliformis, these are nucleus of paleocerebellum, and the dentate nucleus is considered as nucleus of neocerebellum. First we will study the dentate nucleus. It is most prominent nucleus amongst all 4 deep nuclei. It is the largest in primates, especially in humans. Dentate nucleus is nucleus of neocerebellum and receives the afferent fibers from the neocerebellum. Coming to the second nucleus, emboliformis nucleus. If you see, this one is emboliformis. It is oval in shape. situated medial to the dentate nucleus. You can make out here it is partially covering the hilum of the dentate nucleus. Emboliform nucleus is nucleus of paliocerebellum, hence receives afferent fibers from the paliocerebellum. The third group is globose nucleus. This one is globose nucleus. It is rounded in shape, lies between emboliform and fastigial nuclei. It has similar connection to that of emboliform nucleus. Globose and emboliformis nuclei together are referred to as nucleus interpositus. Coming to the last and medialmost group, that is fastigial nucleus. It lies near midline in the vermis and close to the roof of the fourth ventricle. In this diagram, you can make out this is the inferior vermis, this one is the superior vermis, and you can see it lies in the medialmost part, that is vermis, and this is a fastigial group. Nucleus fastigi is nucleus of archicerebellum. It receives afferent fibers from flocculonodular lobe, so it is a nucleus of archicerebellum. If you want to see the three-dimensional picture of all four groups from lateral to medial, you can make out this is lateralmost and largest, that is dentate nucleus, whose hilum is directed medially, and along the hilum you can see this is the second nucleus called as emboliformis. The third nucleus is globosus and the fourth one is fastigial. The globosus and emboliformis together it is called as nucleus interpositus. The dentate nucleus is nucleus of neocerebellum. These two interpositus nuclei, they are nucleus of paliocerebellum, and the medialmost nucleus fastigi is nucleus of archicerebellum. Now we'll come to the connections, in which most important connections are, or almost all the connections are through cerebellar peduncles. Cerebellar peduncles are afferent and efferent fibers of cerebellum which are grouped together on each side into three large bundles, and these are called as cerebellar peduncles. You can make out here these are cerebellar peduncles. There is superior cerebellar peduncle, then middle cerebellar peduncle, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. You can see this is superior cerebellar peduncle, this is middle cerebellar peduncle, and this one is inferior cerebellar peduncle. The color wise also you can make out this is superior, this one is middle which is largest, and this is inferior. Each peduncle we are going to study. First of all, superior cerebellar peduncle. Superior cerebellar peduncle connects cerebellum to the midbrain. You can see here, this is superior cerebellar peduncle. It is also called as brachium conjunctivum. It represents the major output from the cerebellum. So output connections are through superior cerebellar peduncle. What are the output connection that we will see? So in this diagram, you can make out this one is superior cerebellar peduncle. So this is cerebellum, this is pons, this is medulla, and this one is midbrain. And you can see the cerebellum is connecting to the midbrain through superior cerebellar peduncle. And you can see all these are the connections. Mainly efferent. So the fibers which are connecting the cerebellum through superior cerebellar peduncle are dentato-rubrothalamic tract. Dentato-rubrothalamic tract. So you can see here, this is dentate nucleus. From here it will go to the red nucleus of midbrain and then to the thalamus. So dentato-rubrothalamic tract. Then interposito-rubrothalamic tract. So here you can see globose and emboliformis together, it is called as interpositus, and from interpositus the fibers are going to the thalamus through red nucleus. So that is interposito-rubrothalamic tract. Then fastigiothalamic tract. Again you can see this is the fastige, and from here it may go to the thalamus. And again fastigio-vestibular, from fastige to the vestibular nuclei, which are present in the lateral part of the floor of the fourth ventricle. The afferent pathways which are present in the superior cerebellar peduncle are ventral spinocerebellar fibers, trigeminocerebellar fibers, and cerebellocerebellar fibers. So these are afferent, means which are coming towards the cerebellum: ventral spinocerebellar, trigeminocerebellar, and cerebellocerebellar. Now coming to the second part, that is middle cerebellar peduncle. This is a bundle of white substance containing mainly the afferent fibers and connects the cerebellum with the pons. It also has two types of fibers, afferent and efferent. The afferent fiber system contains the pontocerebellar fibers, while efferent contains the cerebello-reticular fibers. So this is pontocerebellar fibers, and these fibers are also called as mossy fibers. Now coming to the inferior cerebellar peduncle. It is a bundle of white fibers connecting cerebellum to the medulla oblongata. It begins at middle of posterior part of medulla oblongata middle of posterior part of medulla oblongata, and passes upwards and laterally, forming lower lateral boundary of the fourth ventricle, passes between middle and superior cerebellar peduncle and enters the cerebellum. So it is passing between superior and middle. It consists of two divisions. One is called as restiform body and other is called as juxta-restiform body. First, restiform body. It is an afferent fiber system containing dorsal spinocerebellar tract, cuneo-cerebellar tract, oleo-cerebellar tract and reticulocerebellar tract. You can make out here, this is inferior cerebellar peduncle, which contains the different afferent fiber system which is together called as restiform body, and these contain dorsal spinocerebellar tract, then cuneo-cerebellar tract. So this is cuneo-cerebellar, and this is dorsal spinocerebellar, cuneo-cerebellar. The spinocerebellar tract is also called as mossy fibers. Then oleo-cerebellar, you can see this is inferior olivary nucleus. From there the climbing fibers to the cerebellum. Then reticulocerebellar, these are the reticulocerebellar fibers. The inferior cerebellar peduncle also contains juxta-restiform body. It contains vestibulocerebellar fibers, cerebellovestibular fibers and cerebelloreticular fibers. So out of these, only vestibulocerebellar are group of afferent fibers, while two are efferent fibers. So in short, if you want to revise, it contains two types of fibers, restiform body and juxta-restiform body. The restiform body contains spinocerebellar, then cuneo-cerebellar, reticulocerebellar and oleo-cerebellar. These together called as restiform body, while remaining fibers in that vestibulocerebellar only afferent and cerebellovestibular and cerebelloreticular, these are together called as juxta-restiform body. So how these input connections are formed? First, spinocerebellar tract. The proprioceptive fibers which are coming from posterior root ganglion, they come to the posterior horn cells, that is nucleus dorsalis of the spinal cord. Here either they pass through anterior white commissure forming anterior spinocerebellar tract, which are going through superior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellar cortex. So from spinal cord it may go from here. So that is anterior spinocerebellar tract, or it may go from posterior horn cells through posterior spinocerebellar tract to inferior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellar cortex. So they form a mossy fibers. One most important thing you can make out here, the anterior spinocerebellar tract is decussating. So decussation took place between pons and medulla. So here it is decussated. While the posterior spinocerebellar tract is going through same side. The input connections are corticopontine, pontocerebellar and dentatothalamic tracts. So you can make out here, this is input, that is corticopontocerebellar pathway. The corticopontine tract, so you can see this is cerebellar cortex. So from cerebellar cortex it is going to the, this is corticopontine. So from there it will come to the pons and then it will go to the pontocerebellar tract. So this is corticopontocerebellar input pathway, and the pontocerebellar fibers pass through middle cerebellar peduncle. The output pathway is, you can see here, the Purkinje axons of deep nuclei. Purkinje axons of the deep nuclei to the dentatothalamic tract through superior cerebellar peduncle to the thalamus, and from thalamus you can see here to the cerebral cortex. So this is ventrolateral thalamus part. So thalamocortical tract. So this is output pathway. So if you want to describe again all these connections, you can see, if we consider this is cortex whose precentral gyrus is here, then this is brainstem, then this is pons, and suppose on this side there is a cerebellar cortex or the cerebellum. So here is the cortex and here deep nuclei. So you can see here from Purkinje cell, axon, cerebellar cortex to the deep cerebellar nucleus, that is dentate nucleus, and from here through superior cerebellar peduncle to thalamus and to the precentral gyrus. Then from precentral gyrus to through corticopontine tract to the pons, and from pons to the cerebellum through middle cerebellar peduncle, and here decussation took place, that is transverse pontine fibers. Now coming to the input connections, second, vestibulocerebellar tract. The vestibulocerebellar tract, you can see the vestibular nuclei, they are present in the lateral part of the floor of the fourth ventricle. So these vestibular nuclei from here goes through inferior cerebellar peduncle to the most medial nucleus of the cerebellum, which is present in the deeper portion of the vermis, that is nucleus fastigi, and from here the fibers pass to the through the uncinate fasciculus to thalamus, and from here they may go to the motor cortex and association cortex. Another group of vestibulocerebellar, you can see vestibular nuclei through the flocculonodular lobe and inferior vermis, and then from here it goes to the vestigial nucleus. So there are two pathways. Now here another one is reticular formation. From reticular formation, the fibers are going to the nucleus vestigi. So vestibulocerebellar tract, vestibulospinal tract to the vestibular nuclei. From vestibular nuclei, the fibers are going through inferior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellar cortex, or it may go to the nucleus vastigi. So from nucleus vastigi, fibers are going through superior cerebellar peduncle to the thalamus and the precentral gyrus. So vestibulocerebellar. So this is an input pathway. Now output pathways. Again here you can make out the output pathways. They are through superior cerebellar peduncle, that is from dentate nucleus to through red nucleus to thalamus and to the motor cortex and association cortex. Another from cerebellar cortex to the inferior olivary nucleus. So you can make out the output pathways. From the dentate nucleus, deep cerebellar, through superior cerebellar peduncle to the red nucleus, then from the cerebellar cortex or the Purkinje cells to the inferior olivary nucleus. So these are the output pathways. Now coming to the blood supply of the cerebellum. The most important, there are three arteries which completely supplies the cerebellum. First one is superior cerebellar artery. So you can see this is superior cerebellar artery. So this is diagram of the circle of Willis, which is present at the base of the brain. Details of that we are going to study along with blood supply of brain. For time being, you can remember there are set of arteries which form a pentagon at the base of the brain, which are formed by contribution from the internal carotid artery. You can see here branches of internal carotid artery, then branches of the vertebral artery. So two vertebral arteries join to form a basilar artery. So these are a different set of branches of basilar artery. Here this is internal carotid artery and its branches. So together they form a pentagon called as circle of Willis. Out of these sets, we are concerned with this part which supplies the cerebellum. So this is superior cerebellar artery. which is a branch of the basilar artery and supplies the superior surface of the cerebellum. Then anterior inferior cerebellar artery, which is a branch of again basilar artery. This one is anterior inferior cerebellar artery, which is branch of basilar artery. This supplies the anterior part of inferior surface. Anterior part of inferior surface. So you can remember anterior inferior means anterior part of inferior surface of the cerebellum. This artery is supplying. Then superior cerebellar means it is supplying the superior surface of the cerebellum. And the third one is posterior inferior cerebellar artery. So you can make out this is posterior inferior cerebellar artery and this is branch from the vertebral artery. So two branches from the basilar artery and one branch from the vertebral artery. And the name itself tells you it will supply the posterior part of inferior surface of the cerebellum. Posterior part of inferior surface of the cerebellum. So if you want to locate the areas, you can make out here. This is posterior view of cerebellum and this is anterior view of cerebellum. And the three colors gives you the complete distribution of the arteries supplying to the cerebellum. Now this area from posterior view, so that is superior surface, is supplied by superior cerebellar artery branch of basilar artery. Then this one is anterior, this area is supplied by the anterior cerebellar artery, which is again branch from the basilar artery. So it supplies the anterior inferior cerebellar. So inferior surface is divided into two, the anterior part and the posterior part. Anterior part is supplied by anterior inferior cerebellar artery and the posterior part is supplied by posterior inferior cerebellar artery. The posterior inferior cerebellar artery is a branch from the vertebral, while the anterior inferior cerebellar artery is branch from the basilar artery. Now coming to the clinical correlation. The cerebellar lesions are due to either by trauma, vascular occlusion or tumors. Due to these cerebellar lesions, they produce a number of signs and symptoms which together constitute the cerebellar syndrome. These cerebellar lesions or syndromes are grouped into two parts, either anterior vermis syndrome and the posterior vermis syndrome. The anterior vermis syndrome can also be called as archicerebellar syndrome, while the posterior vermis syndrome can be labeled as neocerebellar. As we have seen in the last lecture, the archicerebellum is responsible for the tone, posture of the trunk muscles, and the neocerebellum are responsible for the skillful movements. So anterior vermis syndrome or the archicerebellum lesions of this part will lead to mainly involves the leg region of the anterior lobe and results from atrophy of the rostral vermis, most commonly caused by alcohol abuse, which will result into waddling gait, trunk and leg dystaxia. The posterior vermis syndrome involves the flocculonodular lobe, usually the result of the brain tumors in children, mostly the medulloblastoma, and it will result in the truncal dystaxia. The cerebellar dysfunction is characterized by triad, that is hypotonia, disequilibrium and dyssynergia. Hypotonia. What is hypotonia? Loss in the resistance normally offered by muscles to palpation or to passive manipulation, which will result in floppy, loose, jointed, ragdoll appearance with pendular reflexes. So that is hypotonia. Decreased muscle tone. Second important feature is disequilibrium. What do you mean by disequilibrium? There is loss of balance characterized by gait and trunk dystaxia. Usually you can see due to the alcohol abuse or after alcohol taken. What are the sign symptoms? If you see, there is a loss of balance and there is a gait and trunk dystaxia. This is called as dysequilibrium. Then another feature is dyssynergia. The dyssynergia means loss of coordinated muscle activity, and which include dysarthria, that is slurred or scanning speech. Then dystaxia, which is lack of coordination in the execution of voluntary movements. For example, gait is affected, the trunk muscles are also affected, leg and arm dystaxia is also there. So that is dystaxia. Loss of coordination of voluntary movements of trunk, leg and arm. Then another features of dyssynergy are dysmetria and intention tremor. The dysmetria, it is the inability to arrest muscular movement at the desired point. So it can be tested by past pointing test. All these tests you must have studied in physiology. Then intention tremor. It occurs during voluntary movement, a type of dysmetria. Intention tremor means if you concentrate, if you ask the person to raise the hand and observe, there will be tremors in the fingers. So that is intention tremor. Then dysdiadochokinesia. It is the inability to perform rapid alternating movements, rapid supination and pronation of the hands. Then nystagmus. Nystagmus is dystaxia of eye movements. Ocular dysmetria also can be called. So nystagmus, involuntary rotatory movements of the eye. Then dyssynergia, decomposition of movement by the numbers phenomena consists of breaking down a smooth muscle act into a number of jerk awkward component part is called as dyssynergia. During this there is rebound or lack of check, which results from inability to adjust to the changes in the muscle tension, which is caused by loss of cerebral component of stretch reflex, may be tested for by having the patient flex his forearm at the elbow against resistance. Sudden release results in the forearm striking the patient's chest. So in short, we have studied different deep nuclei. These nuclei are from medial to lateral: nucleus fastigi, which is nucleus of archicerebellum, nucleus globosus, and emboliformis, which is nucleus of paliocerebellum, and nucleus dentatus, which is nucleus of neocerebellum. The nuclei, you all know that archicerebellum, paliocerebellum, and neocerebellum, they have different function. The archicerebellar lesions will lead to disturbance in control and regulation of equilibrium and inability to maintain erect posture, which will result in the waddling gait, while neocerebellar dysfunction will lead to the muscular hypotonia, intention tremors, adiadochokinesia, nystagmus, scanning speech, ataxic gait. Ataxic gait means incoordination of upper and lower movement uninfluenced by the vision. So if you would able to imagine the person who is drunken, how his gait is, how he behaves, that will be the cerebellar syndrome. Thank you so much.